All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, who has a fish tank behind him, which I've noticed for the first time, but apparently been there for the past 5 months of recording. Today, we're going to talk about American League Cy Young. We're going to talk about these MLB division and pennant futures ahead of the trade deadline. And then we'll spend the end of the show talking about the vaunted NFC South. But Drew, let's start with AL Cy Young, where Tarik Skubal is an aggressive minus 150 favorite. Corbin Burns is plus 325, second favorite. And then we have Logan Gilbert, Seth Lugo, Garrett Crochet, Tanner Houck, and a number of long shots we can get into. But what do you think of this market?
Yeah, it's interesting because every time we've talked about AL Cy Young, I think the sentiment was, how long can Skubal stay at the top? He's shown some shaky stuff of late. Blah, blah, blah. And yet here he is here still at the All-Star break, a healthy minus 150. There has been rumblings, most notably from Tom Verducci. And you can, assess the veracity of these as you will, that both the Orioles and the Dodgers, most notably, have eyes for Skubal to help them with some pennant pushes. And I tend to, you hear that, you read that stuff, and you're just immediately like, ooh. If he goes to LA, then all of a sudden we have a massively broken market because he's now winning the AL Cy Young if he finishes the season wearing Dodger blue. I'll tell you that much. But kind of poking around, asking some people who do kind of a more numerical approach to baseball handicapping and modeling, they were like aghast at the Tigers even entertaining the idea of trading Skubal. Because he is apparently with the club control for the next couple of years, what they're paying him and how good he is and consistent he's been. He is one of the top assets in all of baseball. And so it would take a healthy package for the Tigers to consider it. And who knows, maybe that's exactly what is in store here. But, I think my hopes were kind of dashed a little bit as I was trying to understand if that was a very likely thing that he was going to be moved to the NL. Now, I don't really know who I would make the second choice, which was the second part of this exercise. I was like, well, if he moves, then who should it be? And, you gravitate to Corbin Burns because he's an Oriole, because he was a preseason, he was at the top of this market. But he still has some ground to make up against a number of players who, really don't have as much name recognition but who have put together awesome resumes this season. So I don't have a strong opinion about who should be the second choice here. My eyebrows immediately went up looking at Crochet and his F-WAR to this point in the season, and like, well, wait a second, why is he 28-1? Apparently he probably is going to get shut down in the next with 40 more innings or so, as they either trade him for assets for the future or just put him on ice for contending in the future. So what do you think in terms of who ought to be the second choice here? And do you think this is a market where you have appetite to bet against Skubal?
Yeah, I think Burns should be the second favorite, even if it's a somewhat distant second favorite, and he's not a very inspiring choice, but he still has a 2.43 ERA. He's still Corbin Burns. He has all the pedigree in the world. He has a lot of narrative going to the Orioles. So I think he is the second most likely guy to win behind Skubal. But to your point, even if it's a low chance, just any chance that Skubal, any material chance that Skubal could get traded to the NL. And as you mentioned, the Dodgers have been the team most linked with him. That makes this market more compelling. The fact as well that he has a significant injury history and the Tigers aren't really competing for anything. And so, look, it's unlikely that he'll get injured, and it's not like they're just going to shut him down for the sake of it. He's competing for Cy Young. If he's healthy, he's going to play out the season. But if there is any niggling issue, that could be a problem for him. And also, like, he is in front at the moment, but it's not like he's created massive distance. Like, he has a 2.41 ERA. Like, he's one bad start, one bad blow up from being in the 2.75, 2.8 range, and all of a sudden being right back to the pack. So in terms of other guys who I think are of interest, again, much like National League Cy Young, with these pitching awards markets, I think generally what you need to be doing is it's very hard to just like lock in on one guy and be like, yeah, this is the guy that I think is definitely the horse for AL Cy Young, because there's just so much variance and volatility in pitching. Like someone can pitch to a Cy Young level and do everything that's in their control, and they just get screwed by batted ball luck. That's just how this works. And voters haven't gotten to the level yet where they're just going to vote off of FIP and FWAR, which are, the statistics that probably speak most to what pitchers can actually control themselves. So I think you do have to sprinkle a little bit just by nature across a number of guys, often in these markets. So the ones who are most appealing to me right now at price, Cole Reagans, who's like 35-1. He's second in FWAR. He's almost 11 Ks per nine. He has this aura of dominance with Kansas City. There's a lot of narrative there. He also, just of the guys that we're going to talk about and have talked about, like, he is very young, so there's just more kind of talent and skill upside in him, as opposed to, I kind of know what Corbin Burns is at this point. So a little bit more upside in someone like Reagans. George Kirby as well, who is fifth in FWAR, who has a 2.81 FIP. He's taken strides from last season when he was kind of on the periphery of the discussion for Cy Young. I think with this award, what has become clear to me, betting it the past 5-7 years or whatever, is that you need superlatives. Like, you can't just have like a well-rounded kind of like Sonny Gray case last year where he ended up finishing second, but he wasn't like the best really at anything. And it's not, you can't just have like, a 2.45 ERA and then you're just definitely going to win over the guy who has a 2.55 ERA. ERA is the most important thing in the award, but you need other aspects that are compelling. And so someone like Reagans, who does have, high strikeout total, has that aura of dominance. Kirby has the best command and control in the league. He has the lowest walk rate in the league. So he has a superlative there. Whereas, like, I want to believe in like Tanner Houck, who ticks a lot of boxes. He has a 2.54 ERA. He has a decent chance to win the ERA title. He's on a feel-good Boston team that is defying expectations. His underlying stats are good too, but like, he's under a K per inning. Just no one thinks that Tanner Houck is like a Cy Young award winner either. Now, he can take it out of voters' hands, where if he just wins the ERA title by such a gap and there's no other inspiring candidate, he could win. But guys like him just have a little bit of a higher bar to clear. So that's why, for me, guys like Reagans and Kirby are a little bit more compelling. And then the other guy I mentioned, just because he's the third favorite, Logan Gilbert, is, I think he's probably rightfully the third favorite. I think he's in the same mix as guys like Reagans and Kirby. Gilbert, again, just a very well-rounded case, very solid. He does have at least the superlative of right now leading the league in whip, which is something that voters constantly talk about as being really important to them. And if he's going to keep a whip under 0.9, then that could propel him in the race. But again, he's just not quite that good, I think. He's 10th in FWAR. He's getting lucky in terms of home run suppression and his underlying stats. He's got a 225 BABIP, which just isn't going to hold. So I don't love Logan Gilbert. He seems to me like a guy destined to finish, third or fourth.
Okay. Didn't mention Seth Lugo, who does have a win edge over Burns and a innings pitched edge over Burns, and looks very similar to him in a lot of other categories. Is there some reason that Seth Lugo is kind of not in the mix here?
So I think Seth Lugo is, the term is a little weird, but he's kind of like an ERA merchant, where, and it's a weird term because you want to be an ERA merchant in this award. It's the most important thing, but he's kind of like, I get sucked into guys. I've gotten sucked into guys like this in the past. Like Bryce Elder had like a 2.30 ERA at the All-Star break last year or something like that. It's like, could Bryce Elder actually win Cy Young? He couldn't, and he got demoted by the end of the season, I believe. But Seth Lugo is kind of that mold, same mold as like Justin Steele last year, who I actually think had a much better chance of winning just because the field was so weak. But like Lugo, he's got a 2.48 ERA, to your point, and that's excellent. But it's a 3.93 expected ERA, a 3.70
regression is
that's gonna regress. Okay. And also, like, he's the type of guy where he will need to have like a more than a 0.5 ERA gap over Burns, over Skubal, over guys that actually people think are aces. So Lugo, he could win. There are worlds where he could win, but I would rather at price be riding with guys like Reagans and Kirby who have a little bit more upside.
Okay, that all checks out, because like I was trying to check boxes in my head, and I'm like, man, if it's like a 5-way tie between guys who are all kind of like I've seen arguments in my lifetime where it came down to who pitched the most innings. And it's like, well, Lugo's up there, so okay, that all checks out. I think I'm going to end up sitting out on this one, as you know, again, like kind of looking at the long term. What Skubal is as an asset, it would seem improbable that the Tigers ultimately move him.
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know, it's obviously guesswork, but I'd say there's like a 5 to 10% chance that they move him, just because like that organization is kind of set up in theory to win next year and the year after, and they would want him to be part of it. So unless the Dodgers like completely bowled Detroit over, I mean, I kind of hope that happens just because of the chaos that it would create in the market, and chaos typically leads to the most opportunities in a market like this. But for now, I think he is the rightful favorite, but I don't think he's close to backable at current price. So I think you have to be against him if you're betting into this market. All right, before we get to divisions and pennants, for the 10th time in history, Royal Troon hosts the world's best golfers who are competing for the title Championship Golfer of the Year. It's the only major where victory is best served out of a jug. The 152nd Open, Thursday through Sunday on NBC, USA, and streaming on Peacock. All right, divisions and pennants ahead of the trade deadline. I think one important thing to note with these markets, particularly this close to the deadline, is you're wanting to project which teams are more likely to go all in and have the capacity to actually add. I mean, it's the same really with the NBA as well, where you're always thinking from the perspective of, all right, well, the Bucks are done. Like the Bucks have no mechanism to add any more players, whereas the Sixers can trade, the 28 and 29 picks from the Clippers, that type of thing. So with these futures, I think you always have to bear that in mind, that teams like the Pirates, who we can get to and actually think it might be a little bit of value at 25-1 to win the Central, but like they're not going to go all in, and the Pirates aren't going to be trading for Tarik Skubal, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Dodgers, they may well do something like that. So on the division front, is there anything that leaps out to you as attractive?
Well, I'm definitely curious what your thoughts are on getting involved with the Orioles right now. Preseason, we talked about Orioles being a potential buy after the month of June was gone, considering how tilted their schedule was in the month of June. They're a team that I would qualify as buyers at the trade deadline, and at least a team that you could see meaningfully improve by moving some pieces around and just kind of consolidating strength. I look at current projected standings at the end of this year, and Yankees and Orioles are about tied, and I'm having trouble figuring out exactly how the Yankees are going to get better without just committing to a very different spending plan going forward, particularly on the arms that they have available. And I'm not sure that the upside is really there in New York the way it is for the Orioles, unless the young guys for the Yankees all just continue to just shred. But I'm into the Orioles already from the beginning of the month, and I think ultimately they should be small favorites in this market, if not exactly pick them. What do you think about Yankees Orioles?
Yeah, I think it's the right idea that the Yankees are vulnerable, just with particularly with the fragility that they've shown in the rotation lately. Like they really needed Cole, Stroman, Rodon, their three kind of vet big name pitchers to deliver, and I think they've all been pretty bad so far. Cole is very concerning. The fact that I know it's only been 5 starts, but he's got a 5.40 ERA, and the underlying stuff says that is correct. Like he's not getting unlucky. He just hasn't been very good so far. Now that could change as he gets more into the season, but that's a red flag. Stroman is getting away with murder at the moment, where he has a 3.51 ERA, but a 5.10 FIP, which is atrocious. And then Rodon has been slowly falling off a cliff, such as his nature. Now, Cortez and Luis Gil, who we talked about last show, they've steadied the ship somewhat, but don't think you really want to be counting on them too much. And then the offense has been, a mess is a little bit overstated, given that they still have Juan Soto and Aaron Judge playing like Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. And also, they've had the past month, I believe, they've had the 5th most unlucky month in the past 6 years in terms of BABIP of all teams combined. So that is going to regress. They'll get a little bit luckier, but outside of really the big two, I mean, right now Aaron Judge is 6.3 F4, Soto's 5.5. And then it's a massive, massive drop to Anthony Volpe at 2.4. So it is very top heavy, which if Judge gets hurt, which is often his nature, then they're in a lot of trouble. The Orioles, to me, the Orioles have a little 23-24 Oklahoma City Thunder equity where they should be pushing chips in to go for it now because they're so close. And if they just make a couple of pitching upgrades, they might be the clear best team in the American League. But I just don't trust that they're actually going to do that because it's the same thing where it's like, if you're the Thunder, why didn't you just trade for Daniel Gafford or something? Why was your big move at the deadline Gordon Hayward? Like, you can win the title this year. You can make the finals this year. And it's like, no, we're just going to keep our assets for now. And I fear that might be happening with the Orioles, but they could trade some of their surplus outfielders, of which they have several, for a real upgrade at starting pitcher, then I think they become really compelling. They might have, just because they have so many assets, they might have a little bit more upside in terms of maneuverability at the deadline compared to the Yankees. So at price, I'd prefer to be on the Orioles. But what I would say the best way to bet into that is to just, and maybe it's not even right now, but just to pay attention as the season goes on in terms of how the market is treating, how that division is shifting, and whether they're shifting the pennant odds in accordance with that, because the winner of that division is almost certainly going to get a bye. And it looks like the other bye is probably going to go to the AL Central winner, who's probably not going to be that scary. And so whoever wins the division out of the Yankees and Orioles should be the favorite to win the American League. And if one of those teams gets into minus 200 to win the division and they still have the same odds for the pennant, which would be surprised, that happens a lot, then the cleaner way might be to bet into the favorite to win the pennant. So that would be my look there.
I like that advice. Can I get your opinion on AL West, where my numbers say the Astros are the better team? They have been the more injured to this point in the season, and presumably will get some bounce or benefit, or at least regression in terms of health luck from here to the close. Do you have an appetite to get involved with Astros at plus money?
Yeah, I think the Astros should be the slight favorite in this market. They just have more upside. I think they probably have more upside as well in terms of making a move. The Mariners famously just do not spend, even though the offense has been pretty abominable for years now. And the Mariners have all the pitching in the world, but the offense is a slog. And I think, just to your point, with health regression for the Astros, like, who knows what they're going to get out of guys like Verlander, like Garcia, if Lance McCullers can ever come back. But at least they have scope there. Hunter Brown's been a lot better of lately. Ronel Blanco was a little bit of a mirage, but he has been solid for them. Framber Valdez, you'd expect, would continue to get better too. And just the offense is just incredibly loaded. And there's still some, like, Alex Bregman right now has a 107 WRC plus. Like, he's going to be better than that. Like, Kyle Tucker is about to come back as well. And he was playing, for its stretch in the season, he should have been the MVP frontrunner. So I think there's just more talent on the Astros. The Mariners, they really should have put them to bed when they had the chance. And the fact that they've just kind of withered away, they lost these 3 games to the Angels. If I had to make a bet in that market, it would certainly be on Houston, for better or worse.
Okay. All right. We're in lockstep there. So between the 2 plus money dogs in those divisions, you get them both. You're happy. You split them. You're slightly ahead, and then you lose them both. You're in trouble. But I think these are all fair plays because we still have a lot of seasons left. And honestly, with both the Orioles and the Astros, the fact that they have games in hand, I like. They're both 2 games fewer played than their rival Yankees and Mariners, which people seem to not be paying attention to. But who the heck knows? Any other division that you think there's potential for a little bit of chaos? Because the other 4 we didn't mention, your favorites are all well above minus 150. The Guardians may be the most vulnerable at minus 175, but that implies betting on the Twins, which I don't really have the stomach for. Any other chaos coming?
Yeah, I think the sneaky thing with the Guardians and the Twins is, I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but I think the Guardians are up like 5-2 in the head-to-head on the season there or something. And so if it is tied, the first tiebreaker is head-to-head record. So the Guardians are a heavy favorite to win that tiebreak. And so you have to kind of treat it as though they're up an extra half game. So I think that the market price is fair there. If I were to have a bet on any long shot in any of these divisions, like I said, it would be the Pirates at 25-1, just because there's a lot of youthful upside in that team. Obviously, they have Paul Skeens playing like Jesus at the moment, as we talked about on the previous show. And like that division is just so meek. And I just think that like they're 6.5 games back. And I think that any team with a pulse within 6.5 games of the Brewers and then the Cardinals in between, that they shouldn't be 25-1. So I don't think there's a ton of meat on the bone there, but if I was to place one long shot bet, it would just be on the Pirates. Like betting into the NL Central is kind of like betting into the NBA's Southeast Division of recent vintage, where it's like, all right, well, yeah, it seems like the winning team is going to win like 44, 45 games. So there should be scope for a long shot to maybe fluke out.
Jay, I bet the NBA Southeast every year I can remember.
It's my favorite.
You're speaking my language here. And honestly, the fact that you have a 500 team like the Pirates who people have written off and they're 25-1 doesn't really make any sense to me at all. This Brewers, 79 plus 79 run differential is nice, but this seems like a fun way to try to capture some huge volatility.
Yep. I think as well that the Brewers, there is a house of cards aspect to them just with their rotation. And they've made, they added Aaron Savali, but outside of that, the rotation is very weak and that could collapse in a hurry. So the offense is good enough that they should be propped up, but they're not the most fearsome team at the moment, Milwaukee. Before we leave baseball, one thing I'll say is that my favorite bet of the Pennant World Series markets is the New York Mets.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's still some 30-1 about on the Mets. I think the kind of consensus price in the market is more like 22-1, 25-1. But if you shop around, you should be able to get 30-1. And I think the sneaky-ish thing about the National League is that with the injuries that the Dodgers and Braves have suffered, I don't think there is like an overwhelming juggernaut in that league. I think the Phillies should actually be the favorite for the National League, just with their pitching, with the fact that they're, like 7 games up on the Dodgers. And so they'll likely have home field throughout. But I think that, like, if you're just looking at it, the Mets are 30-1. They're a 50% chance to make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, are they going to be like, 14-1, 15-1 to win the pennant? Like, I don't think so. I don't think any team is dominant enough in the NL to get them to that level. Kodai Senga is about to come back. The offense is just awesome. Like, that's not fluky. It's just an extremely talented offense is really clicking now that Francisco Alvarez is back. Francisco Lindor is playing like a top 4 MVP candidate. So I think the Mets are legitimate. And I think as well, you talk about trade deadline upside, like with Cohen's pockets, I think the team is deep enough now that they could actually, add a pitcher. If they add a pitcher and all of a sudden, like Severino's been really good, Manaya's been fine, Quintana's fine as a 4th or 5th guy, and then you have Senga, was a legitimate ace last year. The bullpen is a mess, and that's something I'll have to address. But if you want to try and get lucky in one area for a few months, the bullpen would be it. But I think the Mets are pretty compelling just from a talent perspective, and I think that they will be more likely to buy than sell now that they are currently sitting in a playoff spot.
Okay, and you like them more for NL than you do for World Series, I'm guessing.
I do. For the most part, their World Series prices just double their NL price, and on average, they'll be dogs in the World Series, just given that that they very likely, or they almost certainly won't have home field advantage in the World Series, and they'll probably go up against a superior team. So I prefer the NL.
You make a strong case. You didn't even bring up the Grimace Karma.
Yes.
But I do worry that you mentioned Francisco Lindor, and now he's probably going to get hurt. Otherwise, that was a strong case.
Yeah, no, the Mets. I'm all in on the Mets. I love the Mets. I love this team. I love Grimace. Love Lindor. I love Edwin Diaz's walk-in music. I love it all. So I think they have upside and they have scope to make this interesting. All right, the RotoWorld Draft Guide is back, Drew, and it has a bit of a facelift, now available exclusively through a new partnership with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Get a Fantasy Life Plus subscription and receive the RotoWorld Draft Guide to help you dominate your competition. Use promo code RotoWorld10 for 10% off and unlock extensive fantasy DFS and betting tools now. Go to NBCSports.com/fantasylife to learn more. All right, NFC South, which is the least interesting division in football by margin, actually. But from a betting perspective, I think there are some angles into this one. So let's start off. Firstly, the odds: Falcons -120, Bucks defending NFC South champions. What a glorious title! 3-1. The Saints +350, and then the Carolina Panthers up +1200. The Falcons, we'll start with them. Their over/under is 9.5, -140 to the over. 12-1 to win the NFC. What is compelling to you about the Falcons from a betting perspective?
Well, I mean, I think the market is way too sure that Kirk Cousins is going to be the guy you saw for half of a season last year before he tore his Achilles. I am not there that he is going to give you anything better than top 12, even if he is healthy, and that there is a long tail to the negative if he is not. And I am, I'm not sold at all on anything they did on the defensive side of the ball. A new regime that I have a lot of questions about exactly how they're going to put together this offense. Like, there's just way too much uncertainty to make them a minus odds favorite, in my opinion, in this division, even though they're the most talented offense in terms of skill position players and offensive line. The quarterback really is still an absolute mess of a situation, even though they have, put assets, put money into it, at least in terms of bringing in Kirk Cousins. But I'm a bet against Cousins at price, and I think ultimately that opens the door for figuring out who you want to ride with between the Bucks and the Saints, who I think are both a little bit underrated by market. It's going to take about 9 wins to win this division, and while both the Saints and the Bucks have clear and obvious minuses that are easy to point out, I still am a little undecided in terms of which direction to lean here. Do you agree with me that the Falcons are there's a little too much confidence market-wide that the Falcons are just going to walk away with this?
Yeah, I think so. Just between new coach, you typically want that type of variance, I guess, if you're more of an underdog team. But when you're being priced as a minus money favorite to win the division, I think there's uncertainty there. Cousins, obviously, off the Achilles, and it's on his plant leg, right? It is on his plant leg as opposed to Rodgers, where it is on the leg that if you were going to choose a leg to do your Achilles on, you would want Rodgers' one as opposed to Cousins. So that is a bit of a concern. And then also they just have no pass rush, and they haven't really had a pass rush since Vic Beasley's fake 15.5 sack season, like 2016 or whatever. They just haven't had those edge rushes there. I think the secondary will be solid. I think they are the most likely team to win the division, clearly, but at price, I agree, you have to be against them. I think Bijan Robinson, who is 20-1 to offensive player of the year, I think that is one to monitor as opposed to bet into that price. And Raheem Morris, 10-1 coach of the year. He should be among the favorites, but I think that is much too short as well. So I'm going to have to be against him. Let's jump to the Bucks, who are their win total 8.5, kind of in that Seahawks, Jags type of 500-y, not a whole lot of excitement going on about the team. They're plus 150 to make the playoffs. Don't think there are any player or awards markets that are particularly notable. The Bucks are an interesting team just in that last year there was a lot. They did a lot that was fluky last year in terms of they were very bad on offense on first and second down, and then amazing on third down because Baker was chucking up these YOLO balls that Mike Evans was coming down with, basically, which you would expect is not going to be sustainable. There is some stuff that counteracts that with the red zone where they should be a little bit better. So, I mean, they seem like an eight or 9 win team, as the market says. And I think there are worlds where, they could be an average offense and an average defense, and that's enough to win the division. But I don't think there's anything particularly compelling in terms of betting into them. But what do you think?
Yeah, so I don't mind taking them on in the South. And again, like I said, I haven't entirely landed on final numbers for the Saints, which is the only reason that I haven't already bet Bucks South. But the Bucks start out great. They get Washington and Denver in their first 3 weeks. Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix you better win those games. And you get them both in Tampa. You should start the season with a couple wins in pocket. And then you finish your season where you are going to be favored in 5 of your last 7 coming off your bye. So there are 2 kind of really nice stretches of their schedule where they can do some damage. They can get a little bit of equity in the NFC South market to start the season, and then you have the home stretch if things get a little bit rocky for them in the middle of the season. The 2 games where they are dogs of more than a field goal. 3 games. 4 games. There's 4 pretty much guaranteed losses on here. They're going to lose to Detroit, where they're 6-point dogs, Baltimore, Kansas City, and San Francisco and Dallas. That's 5. 5 games where they're basically going to, pencil an auto loss. But outside of that, you have a lot of coin flips and a lot of small favorites here. So I do think there is upside for the Bucs to get to 9, maybe even 10 wins here. I don't think 11 is very realistic, and 12 certainly would be absolutely bananas. But Baker Mayfield, he's back on a cheap deal. He's got skill position group that he vibes with. He's got an offensive line that did a decent job blocking for him last year. And I think just in general, if they can have a seamless transition in the absence of Dave Canales, then I think the Bucs are probably going to win the NFC South.
Okay. Well, the other team in the same price range as them to win the division is the New Orleans Saints, as another thunderstorm hits Stanford again. It's unbelievable. I didn't realize I moved to Seattle. The Saints are 7.5 is their win total, slightly juiced to the over 30-1 to win the conference. Again, just the definition of a kind of blah team. I do think there is a little bit of upside just in terms of Carr being healthier than he was last year, where his body was just completely wrecked. They have talent in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed on the outside. The defense should be solid. I think there are worlds where they could be a 9-8, 10-7 type division champion, but there's not a lot of upside here. How much downside do you think there is?
Yeah, so a storm is brewing in New Orleans, in my opinion, largely because Dennis Allen is on the extreme hot seat, and honestly, Mickey Loomis is too. Like, this team has fundamental issues with the way it's rostered. The coaching transition from Sean Payton to Dennis Allen was not good, and while on paper their schedule of opponents is really, really, really favorable, the sequencing is really, really, really not. They have Carolina week 1, which is probably a win, and then Dallas, Philly, at Atlanta, at KC. There are 3 losses in there, maybe 4. So starting 1-4 for Dennis Allen could mean an early kind of being shown the door. And I think at that point, the Saints are just, let's see who we've got. Who have we got here? How are we going to handle the future of this franchise in terms of roster building? And at that point, they're a wild card question mark for the rest of the year. I have a cooler rating than market on their defense by a lot, because I just consistently come into these Saints ratings with aging curves that is telling me that the guys that they need the most to perform well on defense are all well past their prime, and regression is due. And I think just in general, the way they've restacked some of the talent on the offensive line and the defensive line, just the trenches look weak to me. And I think that combined with maybe a little bit of regression at the linebacker and cornerback position could spell trouble for the defense, which would unravel any hopes. So Saints are a candidate, in my opinion, to finish with the fewest wins in the NFL, even though they have a very, very, just generally talented, some talented skill position players. And I think I would rather have tack into the tail of them really just blowing it up as far as like fewest wins or finishing 4th, or something that would really surprise people rather than just expecting mediocrity again.
Yep, I think that's fair. Not a particularly inspiring team. All right, let's close out with the Panthers, who are set at 5.5 wins as their win total. They're 100-1 to win the NFC for the true believers. They're plus 550 to have the fewest wins in the NFL. And so they are obviously a very uninspiring team as well, in a different way to New Orleans. But the Panthers have within them my favorite bet right now in the NFL in terms of a futures bet. And that is, so let me preface this by saying that right now in the market, Carolina's odds to make the playoffs, the places where you get the biggest limits for it, are like in the plus 650 range. So Carolina won 2 games last year. right? They have talent on the roster, and they have a guy as their quarterback who's the number one pick and presumably has some potential and talent. So if the Panthers make the playoffs after winning 2 games last year and they go from 2 wins to presumably 9 or 10, then isn't Dave Canales at 20-1 to win Coach of the Year? Isn't he like deep red odds to win Coach of the Year?
Absolutely, yes. But that's a big if. Because
you just got to go off the plus 650 to make the playoffs. And is he a greater than 50% chance to win Coach of the Year if they make the playoffs? I think he absolutely is. So I think that he should be more in the 10-1 type of range.
Okay, so I think
like price.
I think that's more like where the true odds of making the playoffs are, though.
Even so, then 20-1 is good.
Yeah. Okay. So the major kind of handicapping question about what to do with the Panthers involves how do you take what you got from Bryce Young last year, which was an atrocity, and carry it forward in a way that accounts for any type of development leap, any type of improvement on the basis of having a better coaching staff, having better protection, having more weapons, and just having some experience. This is tough. If you take his entire season last year and you kind of break it down into games where he was meh, games where he was bad, games where he was fine, and games where he was good, he had 1 good game. He had 3 fine games. He had 4 meh games, and he was bad in 8 of his starts. That is a very lopsided to the bad type of performance. It wasn't just that like he just didn't quite get it. Things weren't really there. Like, no, he was regularly throughout the season, kind of sprinkled throughout the, week 1, week 6, week 18, week 4, week 11, week 9, week 17. His worst performance coming in week 14. All of that is sort of steering me in the direction of this may not be salvageable, as opposed to he's going to have some sort of monumental leap and be anywhere close to league average quarterback, which is what they're going to need from him in order to have a chance at the playoffs, in my opinion. Easy schedule. But the way that they handled their offseason in terms of moving on off of specific players, to me says that like if they get a bounce back from a player like JC Horn, right? Does he become a trade piece as opposed to like they keep him around all year and really try to build the defense around him? So that they have about 3 players that I would rate as plus players across the entire roster. And then a whole bunch of guys that could get there, but I'm right now not seeing it with high conviction. So Dave Canales has his work cut out for him. And I would go so far as to say if they do make the playoffs, it shouldn't be just heavy red. It should be 100% because that will be the most impressive, surprising improvement of a team year over year that I've seen.
Yep. I believe in you, Dave Canales. I don't believe in Bryce Young or the Panthers, but I think there's a 10% chance that they're going to make the playoffs with an easy schedule, and I think that makes Canales a bet at price. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you next week.